All right, everyone. Welcome in UGA Football Live with JC Shelton and former Georgia tight end Arthur Lynch. Good to see you, Artie. You missed our little post-game conference, really, with me just spewing out a bunch of facts and my thoughts of the game. Can't wait to get you on with me to help balance me out there. We missed you during that,
Yeah.
but I know you had a big situation, which you didn't know this, but I went ahead. I know you told me not to disclose it, but I told everybody why you weren't there. I said, Arthur Lynch, he's so sorry he can't be here today for post-game reactions because he was preparing to moderate the presidential debate
I
on
was.
September 10th.
Yep, 100%. I sat down with both candidates and regulated it, made sure that no punches were thrown or people were biting each other and like that. So as of now, it's civil, but I can't promise it's going to stay that way.
Dude, I love it. So I obviously we're talking out of our butts here, but I had people reach out to me and really thought that you were actually doing that, which I
Oh,
was like, did you not see my face when I said that stuff? Like I just couldn't believe it. They actually believed
I
it.
thought I was going to be one of those extras in the town hall thing or something like that where I ask a question, but nope,
Yeah.
nope. I had my mother and my grandmother come to town here in beautiful Ithaca, New York, and then I had to get some work done, unfortunately. But I think if all goes well, we got some stuff planned for this weekend. Where some before the game, and then obviously after the game live reaction. But I got to be honest. Yeah, I was. We were correct in our predictions from a spread perspective, but
And the
you
under.
know in the other, but very interesting game. And I think I'll just kind of start it out since you kind of already gave your reaction Saturday. To me, it just felt like Coach Bobo and Kirby, and really the whole staff was just kind of feeling everything out in the first half. And a common theme for us over the past month, really, since we started the show up again for leading up to the season, is like, how are we going to manage the depth issues in certain areas of the team? How are we gonna work around, whether it be potential suspensions, people banged up, injuries? And I think for us, or definitely for me, it's been like the common theme is we have a general under center, right? A guy who is very talented, who has the trust of his coaches and obviously the trust of his teammates. But I think collectively, the coaching staff is like, let's see what we got collectively as an offensive unit and a defensive unit. Obviously, it was what I think 6-0 or 6-3 at halftime. I'm not entirely sure what the score was at, but I think we had
6 Yeah, 2 field goals in the first half for Georgia, 6-0.
right. So I think we understood right away that our defense was, as advertised as it typically is under Kirby Smart. I imagine there was probably some people who were a little bit concerned about the offense, but I think we were conservative for a reason, and we also knew that Clemson had a pretty staunch defense. So what we had to do was kind of soften them up and get a feel for how they were going to play us and our sets. And then the second half was just a totally different ball game, right?
Yeah.
And I think, I think we're at a point right now where there is probably a lot of confidence that is built up on the offensive side of the football that the players probably understand that, hey, we got a special guy under center and he's going to make us look pretty good, even if we might not know exactly what to do. It might not go exactly full speed, but if we just get to where we need to be and put ourselves in a position to make a play, Carson Beck is going to deliver the football. And I think that's huge because wins like that, when you come out against a top 15 team, Clemson, rivalry, neutral site, big stadium, national TV, and young guys start making plays, and guys that maybe didn't think they were going to get as much playing time as they were going to, and then certain situations dictate how much they're going to play. And next thing you know, it's like guys are making plays and they're building confidence. And one thing is super important, and our Marlowe talked about this last week, right? As a player, particularly as a young player or someone who might not have a lot of meaningful scrimmage snaps, maybe they're just special teams guys their first year or two, and now they're coming into a role of a full-time starter. Any reps that they get early, that's just a building up their confidence, right? And when guys do return, right, when the running back room is fully healthy, we get some wide receivers back, right? And all these different types of guys come full strength. All of a sudden, those depth issues that we had 2 weeks ago go away because now you have younger guys or guys who maybe didn't think they were going to get scrimmage snaps this early in the season have legitimate PT under their belt, legitimate reps. So I love where this ended up for the Dogs, right? Because I think it puts us in a really strong position moving forward, particularly with Tennessee Tech, where a lot of those young guys and guys who maybe didn't even get some snaps are going to get more snaps, presumably. And then all of a sudden, we're starting to build up the depth in season. And that's kind of what I was thinking was the biggest win, other than the actual win, out of this weekend.
No, I completely agree with that. And thanks for everybody for just joining us. UGA Football Live, JC Shelton. He's already Lynch. And thank you so much for joining us live after the game. If you got an opportunity to, for live reactions there from me. We just got Artie's take on it. Dude, I want to touch on that where you brought up was those players getting some confidence. And you can name them off here. I mean, KJ Bolden. We'll start with him. It started immediately. I think it was on the first drive. He got his first tackle there, and he tackled a 6'5", 250-pound tight end like it was nothing. Like he didn't gain extra yards on that. That was a tough open field tackle. As a guy that big in college too, I mean, what are your thoughts when a 190-pound freshman's coming at you? Like, oh no, I'm going to run this guy over, right? KJ came down so hard, and that was really impressive to me. It kind of shows you his confidence already.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about him in the offseason. We had a couple of pods throughout the offseason. We talked about KJ, and again, right? Like, I think this is instilled in the throughout the program from a culture perspective, where Kirby's like, if you compete, you do little things right, you're going to get opportunities to make plays, right? You might not be a day one starter playing 60 snaps, and the best player in the field, but you will be given opportunities to make plays. KJ Bolden makes a play. Don't be surprised if next week he makes another play. Maybe he makes two. And then all of a sudden he makes more and more. And then maybe by the end of the season, he is starting, right? Or he is a rotational guy. And anytime you see like key plays like that, and again, it doesn't have to be a touchdown or a pick, but this is just like, that does a world like for someone's confidence, right? Like I remember my sophomore year, we switched from like the pro style punt to that spread punt that most people do now. And that was Orson's All-American year. We still had Bruce Figgins, who moved to fullback. We had Aaron White. So I was trying to do anything that I could to get on the field. And Coach Lilly gave me the opportunity to be the personal protector on punt. And it was just like, looking back on it, it might not seem like a big deal. It was a huge deal to me because it was responsibility that he was giving me to kind of be the quarterback of the punt team, if you will. And, like, again, I wasn't the one screaming down there like a gunner, but it was like, it builds confidence, right? Because every single play that you're in a live game there is a coach or a collective group of coaches on that staff who trust you to make a play. And I think that's huge, right? If you look at ESPN, the Georgia page on ESPN, it says like UGA Coach Smart spreads the praise, but adds that more guys need to step up, right? Mm-hmm. And what he means by that is more guys are going to have opportunities to make plays, and it's up to them to make those plays. And I think that they will, and I think that's going to do wonders for us as we move into these games, which are going to get bigger and bigger and bigger.
Folks, jump in the comments. Give us anything, your thoughts, questions that already I can walk through. We'd happy to do that. Just to finish it up on KJ there. So he actually played the most snaps on defense of any freshman. And the main part of that really beyond, he's a really good player, highly talented, had a really good fall camp. That aside, Janelle Aguero, who was expected to be at star, actually was a late scratch because of a hammy he pulled on Saturday last week. And that we weren't aware of that, right? So they put Malachi at star, which he played out of his mind. Obviously had that incredible interception that looked so much like the one that we saw him, take center stage against Oregon as a true freshman. And now 2 All-American seasons later, here we go. Almost the same thing, just so acrobatic and goes for the ball like that. He'd be a really good receiver. I know we talk about Travis Hunter, and I'm getting off on a tangent here, but put Malachi at slot. Let me see him work. I just want to see that, man. As a
He
football
might.
fan.
You don't know. Look, Malcolm Mitchell played both ways for us. You know what I mean? Like it's
well.
it happens, my guy. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, but I was just really impressed with him and stepping up into that role. I mean, he had a lot on his plate. Oh my gosh, Jonell's out. Malachi has to move down. Now I have a bigger role. But he and Dan Jackson, Malachi back in the back end. I know there's a lot of questions headed in to the season. We talked about it all off season. It was Tyke Smith and Javon Bullard, those guys leaving, and you're like, okay, well, we have some answers that we need to have if we're going to contend for a playoff spot and ultimately a national championship beyond the SEC itself. So I think that's really good for him. And he talked about it. You covered the bases there, confidence moving in to this week 2 game against Tennessee Tech. But I think we'd be remiss if we didn't mention those guys who really stepped up and got some confidence. We don't talk about Nate Frazier. And that was another one of our big points that we covered a lot last week already, right? Running back, depth, injuries, Ryder Robinson out. Trevor Etienne ultimately did serve a suspension. And we don't know if it's going to be one game or not. Kirby Smart was asked about it. And a single reporter, who I'm talking about, asked again after the post in the post game conference and got shot down by Kirby there. He's not going to talk about it. We're not going to know. But, and I think you really harped on this already, so I'll give you credit, was the depth there in Georgia, how they recruit the running back position. We'll be fine, right? We're still going to run the ball. We're going to pound it. We'll be fine. And they did in the first half. It didn't really work out that well, but we knew they were going to stick with it. And how did that turn out? Obviously, in the second half, huge wide open holes, and Georgia just warmed down. The offensive front finally came into its own, right? And Nate Frazier, he's so quick and explosive, he was able to take advantage. And that's not, overlooking Branson Robinson and him coming back from an injury. I think that was another guy who had some confidence back, right? Making cuts in game after that big knee injury last year in fall camp. But really, really impressed with Nate. I will say let's slow the brakes on anointing him the new Todd Gurley or Nick Chubb. Let's control our expectations, folks. This kid, he has a lot of football to play in his career. Let's just slow the brakes a little bit, let him get his feet under. But I was really impressed with such a young guy. He was in high school in May. You know what I mean? He didn't join the team till summer. So I don't know. He might even be 17. I'm not sure on that, but really impressed with him. And I think, already I talked about this a little bit in the reactions too on Saturdays was, that first half. And we talked about it. Me and you talked about it. We won't toot our horns too much, but we did call it on this one, which is a really, really tough first half. I talked about at length Clemson's defense, that front of Peter Woods and TJ Parker and Barrett Carter, those guys, right? The collective strength they have in that front seven. Really, and they use that energy to their advantage, the week 1 being fresh, and really teeing off on Georgia's offensive line, really creating some problems. And we kind of expected that. There's a really talented defense. And, that first half went how it did. Kirby Smart and Mike Bobo and that offensive coordinator position along with Carson Beck. They were really baiting Georgia to go deep, right, to threaten them vertically. And they were really bouncing off in the back end. They were playing that blanketed coverage, really asking Carson to throw it into coverage. And I think that was and I talked about it here, but I'll talk about it for those who missed it, which my biggest thing for Carson was not playing into the bait. Because how many quarterbacks did we see last week? I watched every game I could, and I'll tell you, I tweeted it later at Saturday night. I was like watching Connor Weigman against Notre Dame, and you can name a bunch more. That it's like there's a clear drop off between Tier A and Tier B at college football quarterbacks right now. Carson Beck's up there. I do like Dylan Gabriel. I know he had a tougher game. He got a hand injury, had to come out there a minute for Oregon. They ended up beating Idaho. But I think as the season progresses, you'll see this. And Jalen Milroe for Alabama. Even Nico at Tennessee, I think he played really well against Chattanooga, although it is Chattanooga. Made some throws that normal guys can't make and read the defensive correctly. You see a lot of guys seeing ghosts, and Connor Weigman, bless his heart. I know he was in a really tough game against a good defense there, but several times he takes a snap and he's not even reading he is throwing before he's even looking at his target, right? And that's 2 interceptions, even on a 4th down, needed to keep the game going, does the same thing. He's not taking any reads. But you see that with Carson, that Tier A group, where they're playing like NFL quarterbacks. That's why those guys are going to be highly drafted, right? They do those things like read through the progressions and take what the defense gives them and don't force it. And Carson can do that even more than the other guys I mentioned because of that defense and how it plays, right? In the field position with Brett Thorson, who I'll give him some credit, The average starting field position for Clemson in this game, 14-yard line. 14, right? And you know this, Artie. I mean, a first half battle like that you know that depth is probably going to take over in the second. Let's play field position, right? Let's do it in the red zone. Let's keep the ball in our hands, end it with a kick, and give it and let that defense work. And that's exactly what they did, and it worked, folks. I mean, think about this, Artie. I was thinking about this before we got on. Let's say that you're a fan of let's just pick Penn State or West Virginia, right? So you're teed off, you're in tune on that noon kickoff game, right, for them, and you're watching that, and maybe you miss Georgia-Clemson, but you're a college football fan, you're like, all right, how'd they do? And you see that final score, and you're like, oh my gosh, Georgia just dominated them in every facet they had to, right? 34-3, good grief. Not how the game went, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's why, and this is a little bit off trail here, but I think that's why this is not a barometer for Clemson's season, in my opinion. I think the offense is going to get a lot better with the more snaps because you have a lot of young guys on the outside of receiver that need to step up, obviously. But I think Georgia is going to make a lot of people, and Dabo Swinney said this, going to make a lot of people look bad this season. Georgia is the way they play defensively. But Clemson, I think they still win the ACC. I know we saw a good game from Miami, but defensively, and we know that wins championships, they're the best defense in the ACC.
It's early right now, but I think 2 weeks ago or last week I talked about Georgia Tech, right? Georgia Tech, they had they could have easily had a letdown against Georgia State because Georgia State is a solid program. They handled them. I honestly think the three best teams in the ACC are going to end up being Tech, Miami, and Clemson. We could talk about what Miami did in Ben Hill Griffin, but I think my prediction of old Billy Napier getting fired in week 3 is a possibility, but that's a whole different conversation we will save for later in the show. But yeah, I agree with you. I'm not writing Clemson off because I do not think Dabo is a bad football coach, right? I think people don't like his personality and therefore just think that he just kind of like struck gold there for a couple of years with really good quarterbacks, which, to be fair, he recruited those quarterbacks there and they reached to their full potential. But I just think that like Clemson it's not a program that can compete with Georgia right now. And to be very clear, I don't know how many programs there are out there that can compete with Georgia, right? I mean, I think Georgia is quite literally a step above 99.9% of college football right now. And, I think we could talk about Ohio State. Let's see how they go. Alabama looked very good. Not a great opponent, but they looked very good. But I really do think that, the front runner right now for the rest of the season has got to be University of Georgia.
Yeah. Let's put that in our pocket just for a second, Artie, and kind of get into a little bit more on those teams that you mentioned there as well. But I do want to run through this real quick, just some numbers that stood out. So Georgia ended up outgaining Clemson 447 to 188. Rushing net is the biggest thing we'll talk about here. Go ahead.
No, it's just insane. I mean, I was looking at the rushing stats, and I was just like, it's insane. But go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, you said it there, right? The rushing stats are what we should really look at here because we knew Cade Klubnik's struggles, the young guys that needed a receiver to really step up. If we had to put money on it, which we did, was basically that pass game was going to struggle. So we were like, all right, rushing-wise, that's how Clemson, if they have the game that they want to have, they're going to run the ball well. 46 net rushing yards to 169 for Georgia. That's a 2-yard average for Clemson. And that's Phil Maffa's going to be a really good back. He might be the best back in the ACC. Good offensive line. I mean, that's really impressive to me. Really, really impressive, especially considering those defensive line questions that we had coming into the game. Xavier McLeod, the South Carolina transfer, missed the game. Warren Brinson went out with an ankle contusion. What was that, second quarter, I think? I'm not sure on that. I can't remember correctly. But he was out. So Georgia had to rely on some guys, and they stepped up and played really, really well, especially the linebacker position with Raylan Wilson, who was really impressive. I know we talk a lot about C.J. Allen, but Raylan played really well. And then you talk about yards per play here, 3.6 for Clemson, 7.5 for Georgia, 13 explosive plays from Georgia compared to 3 from Clemson. Georgia, and we talk about red zone right here, Artie, which is a huge thing for a championship caliber team. 4-4 in the red zone with 24 points. Clemson, we talked about that being a weakness for them at least last year, right? I wouldn't be surprised if they had improved there. They went 1 for 2 with a field goal. They only had 2 attempts in the red zone, which I think is just the main thing here. They didn't really threaten Georgia until the fourth quarter. So problem area, here's kind of the opposite end of this. I know we're talking about a lot of positives for Georgia. Here's a question for you, Artie. Problem area, I know this is first week, so I think you won't bite into this, but third down, 4 for 11, had 7 penalties. I don't think the third down is as big of a thing for me because 9.7 yards Georgia averaged on third down, right? But you still, I mean, Clemson played well there, 4 of 11. Penalties, 7. It's a little interesting to me. Georgia is typically one of the least penalized teams under Kirby Smart. You think it's just a first game thing? I mean, we're trying to find anything we can really work with here off one game of competition here, but I think about week 1 thing. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a culmination of things. I think there's a lot of guys that are getting meaningful snaps that really haven't got meaningful snaps right now. So they're in line. There's going to be a higher probability that they're going to make kind of like, jittery penalties. Fun fact, first offensive snap of my career against Oklahoma State in 2009 in Boone Pickett Stadiums. I jumped off sides, false start in a short yardage goal line situation. I mean, truly a nightmare. My first time, on national TV, my name called. It's 88 true freshman. Jumped off sides. They kept me in the game. We converted. It was fine. But anyway, I
bet you're thankful they actually converted that because you'd have been on primetime film review at the front of the team.
I was still on primetime film review, but I think you're right. I think first game stuff. I think there's a couple of guys just working out the kinks. The third down stuff, I'm not too concerned about. They will clean that up. I know Bobo will harp on that big time, right?
Yeah.
Like he'll want to get that closer to like 7 out of 11 or 6 or out of 11. Yeah, I'm not too concerned about the penalties just because typically we're a very disciplined football team. Mm-hmm. And usually on the first quarter of the season, particularly that first game, you're just going to see a couple more penalties that are going to be out of character. If we go to Tennessee Tech and then we have 10 penalties, right, then something is, there's an issue that's going on, but I don't think that's going to be the case.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Total defense. Here's my favorite part of this defense staff. If you're a Georgia fan, you'll love this. 6 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, 1 interception. I mean, you give me that stat line at any game, if you're a Georgia fan or you're Kirby Smart, what have you, member of that team, you're like, all right, that's a good day. Mm-hmm. Right? I mean, that's like 24 yards negative that they totaled there from Georgia. Really good stuff. And I think edge play right here with Michael Williams and Chaz Chambliss, even Damon Wilson, right? I think we love, if you want to add a factor of just a pure pass rusher, Damon Wilson is I got to watch right there, and I think he got some confidence in there. Missed some opportunities there, but I think he played well overall. That was one of those questions we had entering the season. Cornerback-wise, really love what Dalen Everett and Julian Humphrey did there. Ellis Robinson also got some snaps. I think it's really pivotal for him to come in and get some confidence in him because Georgia does like to rotate, right? And barring any injury, you want these guys to have as many snaps as possible under their belt ahead of really Kentucky starting things off for us here in a couple weeks. That should be a tough game. I really like Kentucky. Let's get some news and injury updates before we move on and talk a little bit about Tennessee Tech. Michael Williams suffered a grade 2 ankle sprain. He's day-to-day. But I think already it's safe to say we don't see him on Saturday with the SEC slate coming up in one of the toughest schedules in the country. Let him recover. Jonell Aguero, he was a pregame scratch. We already talked about that. Kirby said he could have went if it was an emergency. Warren Brinson suffered a contusion. We talked about that one. He wasn't able to go, but it's not serious. Dylan Bell went to the locker room, just cramps. I missed that on the broadcast, and I had a bunch of Georgia fans help me out. I think I had like 10 replies saying cramps. So Georgia fans were on it on Saturday. Roger Robinson still unknown with that turf toe. Any updates there? He's been week to week.
That could take a while. Sorry for interrupting. That could take a while, unfortunately.
Oh, yeah? Did you have one?
Toe, I never had it, but obviously played with a bunch of guys who've had it, and obviously not football. But my sister was a lacrosse player; she's had it. It's just one of those things that, like, it's essentially from my understanding, it's almost like a hairline fracture, like stress fracture. So it's not that you can't like play on it. It's just like
Yeah.
extremely painful. Like it's not broken to where they're going to do things like almost like shin splints, but in your feet. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and
And
I had shin
uh,
splints growing up too, and that's very, very painful. He got surgery for
right,
his though, so I guess it's not the timetable kind of jumps up a little bit when you have to get surgery for it, I assume. I
yeah.
don't know much about turf toe.
But turf
Um,
toe's tough. So look, he could be ready to go next week and go for $150, right? Or it could be or it could be 4 weeks from now. Like I
yeah,
think I know Kirby likes to play around with the injury stuff, and I'm
yep.
sure they know more than well, I'm not sure. They definitely know more than we do. But it's like I see turf toe and I just kind of like went some like
Hmm.
there's just no telling. You know what I mean?
I mean, think about like Michael and Warren here, who I wouldn't be surprised if they don't go on Saturday. I mean, I how considering how Georgia plays it safe and for good reason, there's a real chance we don't see him until the SEC slate, maybe even Bama after Kentucky
I wouldn't play
and
him,
Auburn.
honestly. I would get I would get a bunch of young guys, more reps this weekend.
Yeah,
Let the guys that need to heal.
yeah.
And my guess is Trevor Etienne. I bet you they suspend him for one more half, and then he gets some reps in the second half of the game.
Mm. All right, we'll look for that. If we're talking about running backs here and young guys, that means we expect a lot from Branson. Really keep feeding him the rock, feature him.
Totally.
Also, Nate Frazier, Chauncey Bowens, who he got a few carries as well in that game, and then Dwight Phillips Jr. Some young guys there, and Cass Jones. Wait, we just kind of completely flipped over Cass Jones. Shout out to the man Cash Money, as Georgia fans love to refer him to. I think
Yeah.
it's a very well deserved name. Number 32. Right. And I think if you watch that game back, and it's just kind of, it can go unnoticed depending on how you watch. I feel like everybody watches football a little different. Everybody's eyes are here and there on it. But he was charged with pass protection in most of those snaps on third downs, big time
Uh-huh.
downs when it's a passing down. And he really played well in that aspect. And I think Kirby Smart's been kind of hinting towards that all really off season and how well Cash really plays that position. And then they rewarded him with a big time carry, and he somehow stayed up. I thought he was down. We're talking about, I think he got hit at like the 5-yard line, and I thought his knee was down. I was like, ain't no way he's going to keep running through that. And of course, somehow contorts his body into the end zone. I was like, you were not denying that former walk on a touchdown. I
I'll,
love that, man.
I'll tell you what, if he didn't have such a good name in Cash Jones, I would just call him Billingsley from Friday Night Lights. Because he's a Texas kid. He's got the hair, white boy running back. I think I could say that. But he's Billingsley. Party at
Yeah.
so-and-so's now. Now
Yeah.
Billingsley. You know what I mean? One of the greatest movies of all time. But
Every time he gets a snap, it doesn't matter if it goes from -2 yards or 40 yards and a touchdown. It's just all I see on my Twitter feed is exciting whites. Exciting
yeah.
whites. Him and London Humphreys. It was
But well, he was someone else that I wanted to mention as well because Humphreys and I like when we were gonna look, I had high hopes for him in the spring, and it was kind of a mixed review.
Mhm.
And I just had a feeling that like he was gonna keep plugging away, and he was eventually gonna like get up to speed and start making plays. And you know, shout out to Vanderbilt, big win for them and Vatek. But like,
Oh, yeah.
I I do think it's like there's a difference between like you're you're a big fish in a small pond at Vanderbilt. You just are, right? Like if you're one of the dudes there, you talk about not having depth. Like Vanderbilt doesn't have depth. I think that's well documented. That's not a hot take. But when you transfer into Georgia, it's like you got to come to play every single day in practice. You know what I mean? And I think that's probably an adjustment, right? Like particularly like think about the cultural differences between the UG, like Kirby Smart program Vandy. And so, I think Kirby prides himself on like, hey, every day we got to compete. Every day we got to compete. Every day 100%. Every day is an opportunity to get better and to prove that you can play at a high level for us. And so I was bummed when I heard mixed reviews on him because I think he's going to make plays as the season goes along.
Yeah, I think the mixed reviews, and you hinted at it there a little bit. You said get up to speed. That was the thing. It was learning an entirely new offense, new teammate, a new ball from Carson Beck and Gunnar Stockton. Learning that as well. It's an adjustment, as a pass catcher, and just getting in the right spot. And I think that was the biggest thing for him, and it was for Colby Young too, right? And at Colby, we knew he was going to really serve as that red zone threat and that third down guy, as just a towering receiver with a great, really, really thick body, right? That can really win jump balls. And it's such a hard task to cover a guy like that as a corner or a safety. And he made a play there, right? It's about getting in the right spots on early downs and such. And I think I wanted to say this. I kind of missed it when we were talking about the third down struggles a little bit, 4 of 11. And that's when in the first half I was sitting there thinking to myself, where's Brock Bowers? Where's Ladd McConkey? Because that was a first down. Right? That was almost automatic first downs. That's where Georgia was going to go. The defense knew it. Georgia knew it, and it still worked. Who's going to step up and be that kind of always go-to guy? I think Dom Lovett is one already. But London really impressed me. And I think Kirby referred to that as the play of the game for him, was beyond Malachi Stark's interception, was London Humphrey taking that crosser route on a third down, right, and turning it into a score. He used the ref as a pick a little bit, but the Clemson defender was just out of place anyway. And Dabo talked about that he was out of place, even if the ref was there. And he showed off his speed. And look at the end of that was really impressive to me for London as a smaller guy, really, really quick. We know he's quick. He looked for contact at the end near the end zone because he wanted to get in, and he lowered his shoulder. That built some confidence. I can take a hit, and he already knew that. He was an SEC. He played in big time SEC matchups anyway at Vanderbilt. But yeah, thanks for bringing London up. I mean, another impressive part, and that brings me to Georgia throwing it to 9 receivers on the day. Carson Beck connected with 9 different receivers, right? And we talked about how do you replace Brock Bowers and Ladd McConkey. We talked about it all offseason. It was a big burning question, and I think we should put it to rest because it's a committee approach, right? Georgia has so many versatile. That's not how you say it. Basically, a differentiation in skill sets for each receiver, which I think provides the really the biggest problem. You got guys who can win inside, guys who can win outside jump balls, really, really quick guys. Arian Smith really impressed as well. I think we kind of overlooked him a little bit as a guy. He's really, really quick, but hands here and there, being in the right spots here and there in his career, suffered a bunch of injuries in his career. He's an elder statesman in this room, and he showed it on Saturday. I mean, five catches, 56 yards, long of 32. That's an 11.2 average. Got 5 targets, which is the second most on the team. Lovett had the most. Good things from this offense, man. That's a lot of confidence for these guys because they knew they didn't have Brock and Ladd too. I mean, everybody was kind of pushing around that question all offseason, but they come up with an answer against a really good defense. And that's why we can look at Georgia from a national perspective, Artie, is Georgia is the number 1 team by far. And we're not just saying that it says Georgia grads, me and you, and covering the team or whatever, but because they played a high-quality opponent and they killed them. They dominated them. Now, it took a while. They dominated them. Look around college football, there wasn't a matchup like that. There wasn't. So that's kind of why that's why we have that under our belt. If you're a Georgia fan or what have you, no, you are. You're by far and away the number 1 team based off of week 1 performance.
Yeah, but I mean, look, I think we kind of knew that going in. I was not nervous about the Clemson game unless Cade played out of his mind. And it wasn't as sporadic as earlier last year.
Yeah,
but
you're right.
You could tell that you could just tell that Georgia's defense is Georgia's defense, right? That's why I never subscribe to the idea that the defensive line is going to be thin. It's no, Kirk, dude, these guys, they recruit studs up front. The front 8 at Georgia, I will never be really worried about, right? Or the front 7, I should say, because I just think they recruit and they coach and they develop that position or that area of the defense so well, right? And it's like if you don't have some, you're not always going to have like the Aaron Donalds up front, right? But you don't necessarily need that kind of like disruptive top 5 pick at all times. But they're always going to have really good, well developed, hard nosed football players on the front 4, front 7, and they're going to be able to put your defense in a position to win. And when you have athletes in the back end who are disciplined, I mean, the defense is always going to be very, 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 very good under Kirby Smart. I will be shocked if we ever see a day where it's not.
Yeah. Let's actually have a comment here I want to touch on before we get into Tennessee Tech, Artie. The bulk of it is basically saying Carson and the offense still too slow to start. We can't play like that against a good, solid team. That's exactly what happened when we played Bama in the SEC championship game last year. That's from Alicia Dyer on X. Thank you for commenting, Alicia. I can understand that, especially. I can understand that, absolutely. But I think we touched on it a little bit earlier, which is basically saying that defense that you have there, right? There's 2 ways to do it. You can be overly aggressive in a close ball game to start. You can take more chances and hope they work out. Most of those are 50-50 plays, right? Or you take what the defense gives you. If it's under routes, that's under routes. If that's rushing upside or outside zone, that's what it is. And I think you have a really, really good coordinator. You have a really, really good quarterback, really good offensive line, and a defense that you can absolutely trust against any offense in the country, right? No defense is going to play with the level of talent and discipline, keeping things in front of them, and really, really good in the red zone as Georgia. So, you just take it as it comes, is what I'm saying here. Is get the defense gives you. Now, Alabama in that game, I mean, look back at how many just incredible plays that you're not making 9 times out of 10, right? And also getting favorable calls on reviews. Terrion Arnold, that catch. Let's talk about that. That was a huge play, and Milroe was escaping, making so many plays, but also Georgia shot itself in the foot with a turnover in its own territory, and it's still just a 3-point game. I think that might be. I'm not with you there, Alicia. Artie, what say you about that? The slow starts and such, and I know that was something we even talked about last year, really at the beginning of the season. I'm not a believer.
That you're okay. I just want to make sure you're okay emotionally right now.
What?
I feel like you were reliving the trauma of the Alabama game there for a second.
I was a little bit. No, honestly, you're right.
Yeah, I was like, he hasn't recovered yet. I'm sitting there just holding my tongue. I was like, he's like, oh, refs calls turnover. I was like, oh, poor guy. He's just not. It's okay. Hey, new season. We'll see him in a couple weeks. Look, last year's Bama game was tough because you're dealing with Nick Saban, and it's like, I get it. Like, I totally agree with you. The calls, the catches, but at the end of the day, like, when you're playing one of the best coaches of all time, it's like it's never business as usual, right? And I think for every slow game that someone mentions that our offense, for every time someone mentions, oh, our offense starts slow, I can also show you an example where our offense comes out firing on all cylinders, right? Particularly the past 5 years. Remember the Tennessee game at home when everyone was like, this is the game of like the century or whatever. But yeah, it's like all of a sudden it's like 17-0 within 5 minutes. You know what I mean? Yep. And so
Ole Miss last year.
Yeah. And then there's games where you play like a South Carolina where you're supposed to blow these guys 40-0. And it's like, for whatever reason, South Carolina that day seems to figure us out for the first half of the football game. Football's a funny game, right? And it's a beautiful game. To me, it's the most special team sport and most unique team sport in the world, because it's this kind of like gladiator aspect of life where you got to put your nuts on the line day in and day out. You got to count on the guy to your left, the count on the guy to your right. You need to have difference makers at so many different positions on the team on both sides of the ball, really all 3 phases, right? But at the same time, it's also like an orchestra, right? and the coaches are the conductors, and we all have to have these different moving parts, and we have to move in like a synchronization and make sure that everyone is doing their job collectively at the same time. And I bring this up and I get nostalgic about it because it is really such a beautiful game, despite the kind of barbaric side of it.
Yep.
Because all it takes is like one or two guys missing on the backside, right, of a backside block, right? What I mean backside block, say we're running zone away, and we got Travis Etienne. He looks like he could run free, and all of a sudden we don't quite cut off the backside, and that defensive end, gets through the C gap and chases down Etienne for a 5-yard gain instead of a 50-yard bomb, right? When I say bomb, I mean like home run. And I think that's what people need to understand is like there's so many different moving parts. So if Georgia comes out slow, I don't think it's just because like they're flat-footed or they're lackadaisical. It's just like there's always so many different things that are going on. There's so many different moving parts. Some of that's coaching, some of that's players. Hey, and sometimes the 11 guys across from us might just be ready to play ball. Like you don't really know. But I do think this, and I think pretty highly of where the offense is right now, is I think Carson is locked in. Like I really think that guy is locked in, and you could tell in his mannerisms of his face. Like when it was 6-0, he wasn't like throwing a fit, being like, I have to go throw for 300 yards. Let's like throw the ball. Let's do this. Heisman this. He was just like, business as usual. We're going to do our thing. We're not going to get outside of our like bridges here. We're going to come in. We're going to methodically do what we're supposed to do on offense. I trust the coaches to put me in a position to get these guys in a position to make plays, come out in the second half, and it's a totally different ball game, right?
Yeah.
And so we're going to continue to see a locked in Carson Beck, and I'm pretty excited for that because I think this like we're going to continue to start slow. I think is a misconception, and I think we're going to start seeing us start faster and faster and faster, and we're going to be dangerous moving forward.
Something I'll add to that is it would be an issue if it was a consistent thing. I think you explained perfectly that it's not consistent. It's just very noticeable when it does happen, and it kind of gets overconstrued. But I think something to add to that is adjustments here. So what I'm saying is, if you have a slow start, which happens in football every now and then, because the reasons you just explained, I'm not going to keep repeating those. But can you make adjustments, and do you make adjustments, and does those work? That's where the coaching staff comes into play. That's where the offensive 100%. Staff around Bobo, the guys that's not just Mike Bobo up there, the offensive analysts, right? Those position coaches that are seeing things that Mike's not seeing and relaying that back to him of what they're playing, how they're doing it, what their keys are. They're playing inside, outside, mostly. What are they doing, right? And then making the adjustments. And it's a 28-3 in the second half adjustment, right? And you brought up Nick Saban, the best coach in history because of his adjustments. And those adjustments 100%. He made in the SEC championship game in the second half are a large reason of why Alabama was in that game enough to when we made a mistake, Georgia made a mistake with that turnover, they made it pay. Which you have to do in championship caliber games and big teams. And when we go on in the playoff, and Georgia goes on in the playoffs this year and plays those teams, that's where the difference comes. And I think you look at this game in Georgia-Clemson, you should be happy with that from that standpoint. Coaches saw the adjustments they needed to make. They made them, and it was seamless in the second.
And there's also a world, too, like, and to me, this is another indicator of what type of team that we have at Georgia. And again, it starts with the coach. From a player's perspective, it starts with the leaders like Starks and Beck, right? We have two veterans who have all the accolades, who are going to be most likely first-round picks. And so they're setting the tempo on the field. The coaches are obviously the coaches, but it's like when you can put your trust in those guys, right? The game could have went a completely different way on Saturday. They could have that team could have went into halftime. That team being Georgia could have went into halftime being like it's 6-3 or 6 or whatever. It's like dog cussing each other, saying like this, that, like give me the ball or why aren't you doing this? No, I bet you they went in there and they were like soldiers, being like, okay, Let's get the feedback, like you said, JC. Let's make the adjustments that we need to make. We know what we can do within our game. Let's go do it. And they came out in the second half and they responded in kind. And I think that's huge, right? Because like when you do have some inexperience on a team, it can go the other way, right? They can go in the second half and lay an egg, and also you're in a dogfight with a team that really should not be competing with you.
Yeah. And last thing I'll say on that is how beneficial is that type of game for a new team in its first game with the schedule that Georgia has to have a tight game at the half? They don't even have to experience that anymore for the new guys who haven't, which there's a lot of guys who've been down at the half last year, but there are those who haven't, transfers, freshmen, and now they know what it's like. They can play a tight game, come in, make adjustments. If they do what they're asked to do their job, make plays, stay calm and cool, collected, this is the outcome that's a possibility.
Dude, it's a great point. It is a great point because it's just like remember last season we talked about like a little bit of adversity, right? There's different moments of adversity that happen through a season, even if the moments don't seem like are not easily like visible to the outside world. This one obviously was a little bit because it's a close game in a big season opener, but like as a football team, you played the game before, you know how it is. Like throughout the season, there are just like moments. Sometimes you get like 50 moments of adversity in a game. Sometimes it's just one. Sometimes it seems like it's every freaking week and you can't catch a break. But that's the beautiful thing about football is it constantly like your back is put on the wall, and how you respond is ultimately how your team gets defined as the season goes along. And so I think that's a great point. It's like, oh, shit, we were rivalry game, neutral field. We were in a dogfight at halftime, and we came out in the second half, stone cold face, put up 30, and it looked like we dominated the game from start to finish. When in reality, no, we only dominated one half, right?
Mm-hmm.
Dominated both sides. We dominated from a defensive perspective for the whole game, but offensively, we had to work out some kinks, and they did. And they won by 30. So it's like that's huge. Great point.
Yeah. Clemson made you earn it, and you earned it. That's
I
the
think
last
we
thing
knew that too.
Yeah, we did, but how we called it.
I think we knew that they were going to make them earn it.
It's a dub for UGA Football Live on that one. We'll take that as a dub, ladies and gents. Thanks for joining us. We're on X, Facebook, or on YouTube at the Pulse Sports Network. We appreciate your views. Throw some comments in there if you'd like us to talk it through. We're going to get into some Tennessee Tech real quick, and we'll wrap things up. So a couple things to know about Tennessee Tech here. New coach, Bobby Wilder. It's their first season under him. Went 4-7 last year. Haven't been to the FCS playoffs since 2011. Georgia's played them twice in history, once in 1943, 67-0, and another time in 2009, 38-0. So if you get something that comes across your desk that says Tennessee Tech score or no, maybe go no on that instance. They're coming off a 32-25 loss to Derek Mason's Middle Tennessee last week. Scored 20 in the second half, flirted with a comeback there. They were heavy underdogs. As far as offensively, Jordan Potts, you're going to expect him to throw it a bunch. 27-38 last week because they like to throw it around, but they were playing from behind, so it could be a factor. 256 and 3 touchdowns. Junior wideout DJ Lincolns, he's their go-to receiver, 6'4", 205. Best threat outside. Senior running back Jalen Mitchell will get the majority of the carries for them next week. There's one thing, if you were assessing how this game's going to go, if this is one of those FCS teams or one of those paid-to-play teams that can give Georgia a fight, I'm going to say no on this one. There's no spread at all. There's not even Ohio State was like 42-point favorites last week versus Akron, ended up winning 52-6 after a slow start themselves. But there's no spread on this game. So this is going to be one of those moments. We've already touched on it. We're not going to focus a lot on it, but big important game for these young guys, freshmen, transfers, to get as many snaps under their belt as possible. And Georgia to work different looks, especially on defense and the offensive line. Different guys rotating in here for certain plays. Micah Morris, Monroe Freeling on the offensive line, getting in there. Drew Bobo at center needs to get some snaps there, barring any injury for the rest of the season. And then defensively, Really look at KJ Bolden and those guys we already mentioned. Because remember, Jonell Aguero was out last week at Star. Malachi Starks had to step in there. So I expect them to experiment with different guys in different places so they can be as multiple as possible when those big games come on the slate. We'll get into a couple of teams that impressed us already before we wrap it up here in just a minute. And you did like Miami in this Florida game. I think I said this on the show when we picked on Thursday. I was like, these are the battle of the two teams I don't trust. I don't trust these coaches. They don't have a track record of success. Mario Cristobal went 7-6 last year. Florida's had 3 straight losing seasons. I don't know. It felt weird.
Can I stop you right there?
What?
What?
Depends. What?
Why don't you think Mario Cristobal, why can't you trust him?
They haven't put anything on the field that makes me. They lost to Tech last year, and that was the first year under Brent Key, right? I mean, they went 7-6.
Who was a pretty good football coach?
I'm not picking up what you're putting.
What
I'm
saying is Georgia Tech beat Miami last year. You're saying that's like a negative thing when Georgia Tech played.
What the players that Tech had on the field, they should not have even messed with losing to Tech.
But Mario Cristobal has a track record at Oregon. You act like this guy is a bum.
He's in South Florida, baby. The one of the meccas of college football recruiting, and that's what he's given us. He has all the backing in the world.
I am not like a Mario Cristobal stan. It's just like you write him off like he's like. Put it this way. Okay, go ahead. I interrupted you.
It's okay. Listen, we can differ here, brother. When I see it, I'll be the first one to be like, okay, I love what Mario Cristobal is doing. Okay, but I was getting to that, brethren.
All right,
I was getting to that. Okay,
keep going.
Let me get to it. All right,
get to it.
Now, that's the start. Secondly, I think they played pretty well against Florida. Okay, was it because Florida's is horrible? That could be a part of this. I got to bring out the Trump
Florida's
fans.
Bad. Florida is bad. Okay, don't get me wrong. I just think that Mario Cristobal, I think he's going to be. I think he's going to do well at Miami. That's all I'm going to say. But
we'll see. We will definitely see. I really started all this to say they did impress me, and I am impressed with Cam Ward. He was, when I was earlier in the show, if you missed it, when I was talking about the tier and quarterbacks and how there's such a big drop off from the Carson Becks and the Quinn Ewers and the Jackson Darts of the world, and then everybody else. I think Cam, a little bit more of track record, then I'll be willing to put him up in that tier. But as far as throwing guys open, knowing where the defense is going to be, making the right reads and throws, and putting great touch on ball, and a dual threat guy, and that's not even part of this, but I'm really impressed with him. I think, if they keep him healthy and they keep him upright, their defense plays well, that they'll really have a chance at the ACC. And I know they were one of the favorites entering in the season. That's not a hot take, but just a team that impressed. Penn State over West Virginia. Now, Artie, me and you both took West Virginia, and a lot of America took West Virginia too. Yeah. And I think it's just we had some unknowns. We saw Drew Aller for 13 starts last year, and we said, okay, a little erratic, just like Cade Klubnik. What can he do this next year? And they really have to rely on him, right? With a defense that lost some really, really good guys, but that defense played well. Again, it's another one of those teams that just recruits well defensively. Held West Virginia to 85 yards rushing. West Virginia had the number 5 rushing offense in the country last year, and they returned every one of those rushing pieces. So that was really impressive to me in Morgantown, right? So we think about Big Ten and Ohio State, Oregon, who's going to give, and USC even looked good. Who's going to give Ohio State really a run for their money? Penn State looked good. I know it's just week 1, but yeah.
And look, again, not a Coach Franklin stand, but I think he knows how to recruit. They have unlimited resources. People are like, can he win the big games? It's like, if you go 10-2 in the Big Ten every year at a Penn State, when you have to compete against Ohio State every year, it's like, one year, a couple of these games are going to fall for him. Is it this year? I don't know, but
yeah, it's a big game thing for me. It's a big game thing.
I agree.
Yeah,
I agree. And look, I mean, people said that about my head coach, and I love him dearly. You know what I mean? So it's like I get it. But at the same time, you got to give credit where credit is due because it's incredibly hard to win consistently at a high level
Mhm.
in the Big Ten and in the SEC.
Yeah.
And you know, when you think about like some movement in college football, when we talk about crystal ball and we talk about Miami, like I think Miami's positioning themselves with the way that they're recruiting, and I think Florida State is not recruiting at the same level. They're relying heavily on the transfer portal. It's like I think we're going to start seeing some things settle now that some coaches have seemed to found their footing, right? Like I was surprised last night, and maybe you're going to get into this. I was surprised last night that USC beat LSU, right?
Mhm.
I thought LSU was going to be in a better position than they were, and I am typically think Brian Kelly is a good coach, quirky dude, sure. Not a huge fan of his personality, but he usually understands how to put a winning football team on the field, and that was surprising to me. Which shows me that USC might be turning a corner, and which also tells me that Brian Kelly might not be at LSU for very, very, very long.
No,
They are
and
impatient down there.
yeah, and we'll move off from Penn State, and like I said, I was going to get into it as well. USC or LSU, it was just a 4-point line, neutral site, and it was not a home environment for USC. Even I know because sometimes like Atlanta's one of them. If Georgia plays in Atlanta, that's not a. I know it's not at home technically, but the
Yeah, yeah.
majority of the crowd, I mean, the noise is still there when you're on offense for the opposing team. LSU packed out Vegas. That was 80% LSU fans. So I was impressed with USC and the way they were able to stick it in because LSU had that game won, couldn't finish. And there were some issues with the communication from the staff to Nussmeier in the final minutes of that game, stuff like that and weird stuff. And in Brian Kelly in season openers, that's second year in a row they looked like that kind of
Yeah.
and they're
They
seven
blew
and
the game.
seven. Yeah,
They
yeah.
go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. Give us that.
I was going to give a stat. Brian Kelly, they're 7-7 on the road versus ranked teams, three
And
and seven overall.
it's so bizarre because they basically threw away the Florida State game last year too. And like the way that season ended, if they would have won that Florida State game, like their entire season is different. Entire
Absolutely.
season. And it's just
Yeah.
like it seems a bit uncharacteristic of Brian Kelly because you just think like, and again, like I'm not a huge fan of him, right? But I think I did respect what he did at Notre Dame because like he won he's the all-time winning coach at Notre Dame, which if you think about it historically, that's an insane stat. He never
Without a
won the
conference
big one.
championship, but it's okay.
Jesus Christ, dude, you're unbelievable. But no, he never won a national championship. I get no conference championship, but he went to the playoff 2 times, maybe 2 times. Obviously, played for national championship, got his ass beat by a very, very good Alabama team, 2012. I get it, but he won a lot of games. Like I thought when he went to LSU, I was like, oh, this could be a dangerous recipe because they have so much NFL talent that just like falls into that roster. But like the problem with those, Les Miles and the Raging Cajun was like they kind of struck gold on 2 separate occasions, which they each won a national championship, right? Like it was like a bolt of lightning. The stars were aligned. But like when things weren't aligned like that, it was like penalties, not disciplined football, right?
Yeah.
Like erratic play. They beat Alabama one week and then lose to freaking Louisiana Tech the next. Like it was inconsistent. I thought Kelly was going to bring like structure, consistency, and discipline. And I'm not saying that he doesn't, but like if he can't win the big game at LSU, they will just get rid of him. Like they won't even hesitate. You know what I mean?
It's just, and you mentioned like the coach, because the could not being able to get an answer from your own offensive stats as a quarterback on, hey, do we want to run a play before this 2-minute warning? That's a coaching thing. That's all that is. Unfortunately, you look at that as an LSU fan, there's only one person to blame. He's the head honcho, but as a whole, I mean, he sets the standard. So that's an issue. And watch them go on to have a great season. And it's just a whole season opener thing. But I'll tell you about USC. I was impressed with their defense. I think they tackled well.
Mm-hmm.
They tackled well. They were not caught out of place a lot, right? I know LSU got some big gains and on some really good balls from Garrett Nussmeier, who I really like. And I think that defense, they played well, man. And I know that LSU's in a whole new offensive error right now. So it could come back to bite me, but I really like how USC's defense played. And then Moss at quarterback, I think he did some good stuff. That's another team in that Big Ten to watch. I think that showed us a little bit of that. And we need to get through this because it's getting late. But underwhelmed. I'll go through this quickly just for me, and anything you add on it, Artie. Notre Dame and A&M both underwhelmed to me. Defensively, they had good defenses, right? But it's just the quarterback play from Riley Leonard and Connor Weigman. I don't see how's Notre Dame going to get through that schedule with that. I mean, it's like Big Ten to me. It's defense. You win so many games just rely on defense, and as soon as you play a good team offensively that can be balanced as well with a good defense, then you get blown out or you lose in a horrible fashion. It screamed that to me. Just a feeling, I guess. And Connor Weigman and just throwing two reads automatically, not reading the defense, just snapping, throwing, almost releasing before he's even looking. That's just it's not good play, man. You can't against balanced teams. You cannot just be a run-oriented offense with some play action here and there and try to get it deep. It's not going to happen. You're going to win some games like that, but you're not going to win the big ones. Oregon had to fight Idaho. I know that. They scored. They ran like it was 500 yards of offense Oregon had. Gabriel went out with a hand injury. I'm not sure how much that affected him. They did underwhelm, but I'm not sure that's a barometer on the season at all. Michigan had to fight Fresno State. Michigan's not a top 10 team. I hate to say it. We can say that. They started a quarterback who was walked on over a 3-star who he was supposed to start all off season. We were like expecting Alex Orji to start, and then they made a last second move to start this kid, and their offense looked horrendous, just absolutely horrendous. There's a lot of questions to be answered there. And I'll add, Sharon Moore still does not have a signed contract, and it's an agreement. So that's something to watch out for. And my last one here already is I know I'm running through this quick. Ohio State started slow versus Akron. Will Howard had a very, very, very tough start. It wasn't just like if we use Georgia's slow start, Carson Beck was still really good. A lot of questions at quarterback there for him. Jeremiah Smith is an absolute dog at receiver. They're going to work out those kinks, but they definitely did not look very powerful offensively against Akron. And with that, Artie, no, I ran through that quick. Folks, we're going to wrap it up here with Pick'em updates. Me and Artie picked the Georgia game and 5 other games last week. And thanks to the Miami-Florida game that I so wrongly picked, Artie is up 4-2. I'm at 3-3 on the week. We do have a bet in place, or not bet, just our own personal picks here with Boston College and Florida State. We got Boston College plus 16.5. It is 0-0 right now on ESPN. Something to watch. That's going to be a good game. We're going to tune into that once we get off. But already had Miami. We both had North Dakota State at Colorado. It's covered. We both had A&M. Unfortunate there. We both had Boston College, like I just said, and Penn State. We took West Virginia, and Penn State ended up waxing in Morgantown. So those are the picks. We'll make them every week on Thursday. Artie, thanks for joining on, man. We'll wrap it up there, and we'll send you off into the week. Happy Labor Day, everybody. We'll be back Thursday at the same time to get some more pregame talk in. We'll talk about what we've learned is more from the week as a whole and what to look forward to over the next 2 weeks of college football. We can't thank you enough for joining us here, whether it's on live on Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube at the Pulse Sports Network. Artie, have a good week, man. We'll see you soon.
Go Dogs.